I meant go live when I clicked go live. And I've now checked twice that I actually meant to go live. And now I'm live. What an astonishing event. Laura, our erstwhile community manager, will tell me if anything is not working, but I assume that you're hearing me. And probably some of you are already annoyed just by my title for today, which is Fire Your Product Managers. I'm going to say more about that. Don't worry if you are a product manager. I'm not out for you personally, but I am out for your job. So I want to talk more about why I think the days of the product manager are over, and in fact, they have been for a long time. So I hope you're joining us and you found us okay. This is, if you don't know where you are, the Squirrel Squadron. That's up there and over there, and I don't know where I would point, but lots of things about that. I'm Squirrel. This is my squadron. I run events like this every week, or almost every week. And the goal of them is to help you figure out how to make your technology team insanely profitable, and in fact, your whole organization. So I talk a lot about technology and communication and improving how your team works. And today we're going to be talking about a particular role within technology teams, which some of you might not know about. So I'll explain what it is, why you shouldn't have one, and what you should have instead, which will often be the same human beings, but with different skills. So that's today's topic. Now, you should also know about the Squirrel Squadron. And my friend Laura, our community manager, has a little thing she puts up that tells us what's coming up in the Squirrel Squadron. So I'll let her do that. There it is. But what you're seeing there is the kinds of events that we do every week. These are all free, by the way. This is my way of giving back. I work with hundreds of companies all around the world, and I want to give back the ideas that I'm picking up from them, the provocative new notions that people are trying. I was just having a debate about how folks should actually be checking what comes out of their chatbots and ChatGPT and so on. So I'm always talking about those kinds of ideas with lots of folks, and I do that in a couple different ways. These events, so we have new exciting stuff coming in the next few weeks, all through June. Then we have an interesting guest who's going to come and talk to us about how to measure the financial output of your technology team. He's coming in the first week of July. So we've got all kinds of good free events, which you can see right here wherever you are, LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you found me. YouTube as well. And the other thing we have is a forum in which people are discussing and debating all of these kinds of topics. I was debating how to prevent security incidents, how to keep your company secure. If any of you have noticed, Marks and Spencer is in a lot of trouble right now here in the UK because they've been attacked by ransomware. So you can't buy certain things. You can't buy anything online, I think, from Marks and Spencer, and haven't been for months. So that kind of thing is something we'd all like to avoid. And I'm having debates and discussions and vigorous exchanges of ideas on our forum. And that's open 24 hours a day. There are people from around the world, about 3,000 executives on the forum. So those are places where you can engage and debate all these topics, but some of you are readying your tomatoes and getting ready with your vegetables to throw at me, I suspect, because there was quite a vigorous response on LinkedIn and elsewhere and on the forum to this whole idea that maybe we should get rid of this role of product manager. So let me launch into that with some descriptions, some background, some ideas about it. Now, what I definitely want is for you guys to interrupt and argue with me. I don't think you can actually, well, you can put tomato emojis in the chat, so that would be very welcome. Please feel free to tell me I'm completely wrong, I'm all wet, I don't know what I'm talking about, or, some of you might actually agree with me. That would be interesting too. So whatever your thoughts are, please put them in the chat on whatever your platform is. And of course, I always like it if you tell me where you're coming from and what brought you here, so I can make sure I discuss topics that are important to you. I can't see or hear you. That's the one limitation of this live stream format. But I can see and hear, see at least your chat comments. So please put them in. By the way, we have some questions from some of you who will be watching this on the recordings. It'll be on, of course, all the platforms, and then we put the recording up ourselves on the Squirrel Squadron, on the forum, of course. So lots of places where you might see or hear me, and you'll still be arguing with me, but I'm not here. I'm not live. So if that's the case, please feel free. Don't put it in the chat because I won't see it after the event, but come on over to the forum and tell me how wrong I am. I'd be very interested in that from all of you. So if you're sat there at home watching me and you're steaming or you're getting ready to steam, I'd love to hear from you. Please let me know where you're coming in from and what brought you here, what made you interested in this particular topic. Okay, so let me launch in by first saying what a product manager is, because there'll be folks who kind of know there's this tech group over there and they do some tech things, but you don't know what their different roles are called. The product manager is a title that came in, as far as I know, in the middle of the 1990s, when my father was writing COBOL programs on those giant machines that filled a room. He didn't have anybody called a product manager working with him, so far as I know. The idea was that we were getting fast enough with getting pieces of software out. You didn't have to put them on punch cards and then run them through the machine at a certain time and so on, like my dad did. You didn't want to drop the box with your punch cards in it. You weren't on that slow cycle, so you could actually get feedback in real time on whether the program was doing what you wanted. And we were starting to get programs that people used every day, like Excel and Word and things we now take for granted, but in the mid-1990s, those were quite new and revolutionary. Those really were getting to the mainstream. And as people built more and more applications on top of tools like that people were using day to day rather than sort of in batch mode, to print all their payroll checks and so on, we started to get people whose job it was all day, every day, their whole job was to figure out what people wanted the software to do. Now, the person who used to do that was called a programmer. And we sort of abandoned that idea and we kind of split up who was figuring out what the software would do and who was making the software do that. And I think that was a bad idea. And I'm going to try to illustrate that for you with a few examples. And again, I'd love for you to tell me examples that are different from that give me some counter examples and some experiences you've had where this split is really helpful. I haven't seen it, so I'm interested to hear what you have. So a product manager is that person who takes the ideas and the directions and the needs of customers into account, figures out what the software should look like, what the software should do, and then checks it and makes sure that the engineers have actually built it the correct way. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that you might think that, well, hey, I could just write down everything the software should do. I'll just put it in great detail. I'll make sure everybody knows precisely what to do, and they can just write the program to do that thing. Yeah, you could do that if it was simple enough. The problem is most of the time people don't know what they want their software to do. And so it's as if we were going off and building a building without having blueprints. We just sort of, let's put a room over here. Oh, the toilet can go here. Yeah, how about if we put a shaft over there for the chimney? And it's quite chaotic if you don't have someone orchestrating it and making sure that the pieces actually fit together and they match a blueprint. Now, the thing is that we decided somehow in our wisdom as a society, particularly as engineers, it's our fault, right? Us engineers, we came up with this model, so you can blame us. We decided these should be different people. So it's very similar to having, say, a general contractor and then individual electricians and plumbers and so on running around in your house putting pieces together. And that works pretty well in the house building department. But that's because people have been building houses for a long time and they know what houses should look like. Nobody knows how, say, a cryptocurrency exchange for trading carbon credits should look. We haven't figured that out yet. Carbon credits and cryptocurrency are things we invented in the last 10 years or so. So nobody understands how to do this. And so there's not a book you can consult. There's not a place you can go and say, this is how it should be done, as you can if, say, you're a general contractor building a house. Now, that's my first plank in my argument against the product manager function. Nobody knows how to do it. And so because no one knows how to do it, you need senior people with lots of experience who've made a lot of mistakes. And they're kind of writing the book. In 500 years, probably there'll be some practices we can really write down and say, this is how you build software. We have no idea right now. And so my argument to you is, if you are a product manager, or if you hire product managers, or if you wander over to your engineers and you say, do you have any product managers around? And they say, yes, you should be worried. Because some things have happened very recently that are making this model even less workable than it used to be. And I'm going to explain what those are in a minute. But let me start with history. And I'll start with a guy called Joel. He's a member of our community. I could introduce you to him. He moved to Canada I think he's on the west end of Canada, so he's probably just waking up right now. He's probably not on the stream. But Joel worked with me in England in the early 2000s, if I remember when he joined our company. And he worked with me for many years as an engineer. He wrote code every day, came in, sat down, figured out what to do, wrote the code. We didn't have any product managers. We didn't have anyone who decided what to do. If you wanted to know, people like Joel, and we had a number of them, would say, all right, let's go see the customer and let's figure out what it is that they want to build and what it's supposed to do for them. We were in the city of London, talking to the equivalent of Wall Street, talking to traders about what they wanted to do. And sometimes he had to duck because they would throw a phone at you if you got it wrong. But, we'd go over there, the engineers, they would throw phones at us. We'd figure out what they wanted that would cause them to throw fewer phones. And we went off and built it. And so Joel was working that way. And eventually he came along to me and he said, Squirrel, I've heard of this thing called a product manager. I said, yeah, that sounds interesting. I don't know how that works. He said, well, I'm going to become one. And I said, good for you. Why don't you go try that? And let's see what that means. Now, what Joel meant by a product manager is very different from what I just described, where there's a person who all day, every day figures out what the engineer should do, but doesn't do any engineering. Often a product manager is not a technical person. Now, I have another example I want to go through where the person doesn't have an engineering background and is tremendously successful. I'll cover that in a minute. That can work too. But in Joel's case, he started as an engineer. He was writing code. He was figuring out what customers wanted. And he said, I want to shift the balance of that. So instead of spending most of my day writing code, I'm going to spend most of my day going and seeing customers. Well, we were getting more and more engineers. It made sense that they should have some guidance. This seemed like a good thing to try. And man, Joel was good at it. Joel was one of the best product managers I've ever worked with, because he could do something that those product managers you might be familiar with in your team do not do, which is that he would go and build a little prototype. He would hack something together and he would say, well, look, this is how it would work. This is what each button would do. This is why we're building it this way. This is why it will scale so that you can use it for thousands of transactions or millions of users rather than just one. He could give a lot of technical detail about what he was doing. And that was tremendously helpful to the engineers because that's what they were already doing before, in the era before product managers in our team. And so when he came along to just do more of that, he was doing it really well. So this is an example of a T-shaped person or a generalizing specialist. You can look this up on Wikipedia if you want, and I've written about it. The idea is that there are very successful people who are really good vertically at one thing. Joel's actually good at several things, but they have at least one thing that they're deep in. They do a lot of it. And they're broad. They can do a lot of additional things. That's why it's a T-shaped person. And I'm advocating that you should get product managers who are T-shaped, who can do many different things, not just product management. Now, Joel's T happened to be in engineering and design. Actually, he's a brilliant designer of really easy to use software. And so he would do a design, on a napkin or something. He'd scribble it out. Then he would do it in actual HTML and an actual web page that actually worked, and you could click stuff. You might be familiar with designers who build things in Figma. I love that. Good for them. That's a super way to do it. It's essentially like a napkin. You can click it, but it basically doesn't do anything. Joel could make it really function, and he could answer lots of technical questions about how it should function. And that was tremendously helpful for his work with engineers and his direction of them. He could also call baloney, or stronger words, when the engineers were blowing smoke and just saying, oh, yeah, Joel, we can't do this. He'd go, bang, 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 bang. Yes, we can. Here you go. And that was a very useful arrow in his quiver for making sure the engineers were working in the right direction, doing things that were feasible and valuable to customers. And he could have great technical discussions with customers when we had technical customers, which we did in some cases. So I'm making the case for people like Joel. Now, you might tell me, wait a minute, Squirrel. We don't have anybody like Joel around. Our engineers hate customers, and our product managers are really non-technical, and they're not interested in learning about code, or maybe they are, but they're not going to be good at it. That's not their thing. That's okay, because I have another example for you. And this example is another person in the community. Anybody wants to meet these folks, just get in touch with me. I'm happy to introduce you. Marcus started as a train signal. I think he was actually the person doing the signals. So he would pull the lever and the red signal would go up and it would stop the train from going a certain direction. And then he became a manager of signalmen. This has nothing to do with software. This has to do with levers and lights and where trains are and so on, stuff I don't understand at all. But he got very curious. He's a very curious, interested person. This is a characteristic of these T-shaped type people. And Marcus said, you know, I've heard of these things called apps. Apps are really interesting. Everybody seems to be doing them on these smartphones. Well, I'm going to get one, and I'm going to see if I can figure out how these apps work. And he happened, because he worked for the National Rail Organization in Britain, to have a long train journey. And on one of those train journeys, he taught himself how to build an app. He built an app, and not only did he build a toy one, he built one that was actually useful to signalmen. It actually solved a problem. Well, he showed it to some other signalmen, and they said, man, this is great. And he gave it to them, and it spread around among all the different signalmen in Britain. And then the National Rail Organization came to him and said, we're putting you in charge of apps. We want you to build some of these app things for the company, for all people in our national rail system. He said, well, I don't know how to do that, but he was very smart and very curious and very clever, and he figured out how to do that. Then he came and worked in the company I was working with as a product manager, and in fact, a head of product. And he did that in a completely different environment, in financial services and anti-money laundering and all kinds of other things, which he also didn't know anything about. So because he's such a curious person, he was able to learn the technical things he needed to know and give really valuable feedback to both customers who were interested in making software do interesting stuff, and in engineers who weren't as knowledgeable about customers as he was. So these are two examples, and they're real people you can actually meet who have created an opportunity for themselves to make software really, really successful and responsive to customer needs. And they did that by being curious and wanting to build software in a responsive way, a way that is meaningful for customers and does what they want them to do. And that's pretty unusual. You don't get a lot of folks who are interested in that. You get a lot of folks who are turning the crank, who just want to do the same thing they've done before. Well, that's not going to work very well in software, particularly when you're moving into the complex domain, new and interesting ideas rather than sort of doing the same thing again. So there's two examples of the sort of person you might like to have. How do you get those people? You might say, squirrel, hang on. I understand why it would be useful to have some product managers who have these characteristics. But squirrel, I don't have them. They're not around here. I don't have a Marcus. I don't have a Joel. The thing is, you can train people to be close to that. No, they have to have a natural curiosity, a natural interest. Most folks who take a job called product manager, or who show some interest in building software better and meeting customer needs better, making more profit from their technology, the kind of people who are here on this call, I suspect, most of those people are at least interested, so they're motivated. If there's anybody thinking, oh man, I'll get this person who's really demotivated, not interested, kind of just what we call in Britain a job's worth, just kind of does 9 to 5, doesn't come up with anything, isn't committed and interested, don't make them a product manager. That's not going to work, because you're going to get someone who is not very creative and interested and valuable to you, won't build great software. But the person that you are looking at doesn't have to have technical skill, doesn't necessarily have to have knowledge about the industry. Look at Marcus, for example, who was working in finance but had been a signalman, right? Huge difference there. Doesn't have to have design skills. All of these things are things people can learn. And I think that's the thing that so many folks are missing, is that it is entirely possible to learn the skills to be an excellent product manager, to build great software that really solves problems for people, that makes a significant profit rather than being a cost center. It's possible to learn that stuff. And Joel and Marcus are examples of that, because they had to learn from different angles how to build really effective software. And so my challenge to you is, can you take your product managers that you have today, or people in the rest of your organization, and help them to become not only product managers, but product managers plus, right? Folks who can do design, who can do engineering, who can do customer interviews and user research, as well as maybe the product management that they know. Notice you're not going to get this from a Scrum certification, right? And a lot of folks go to get official certifications that teach them a certain process. That's like assuming that we're building houses, right? We've been building houses for a long time. Yes, we've evolved in what we build, and my 600-year-old house is built differently from the house that you live in probably, but the same principles apply, and we know what steps to follow to build a house. We don't know how to do it for software. And so you need these creative, curious, interested, T-shaped people, and those are the folks who are going to be very successful for you as product managers, plus. Now, let me give you some examples of how you move people. So I have a wonderful client who I have to obscure exactly what her modus operandi is, but the brief version is that she leads a conglomerate of companies, so a number of different companies in different fields, and she's very interested in software for her teams and for her companies, in fact. So she's sort of a CEO of CEOs. Now, she's my client, and she came along to one of my events, just like this one. It was one we held about a month ago, in which we had people like this person actually writing code and producing apps that you could use, kind of like Marcus on the train. Of course, what they were using is what? AI, right? And we've all got very excited about artificial intelligence. I can't tell you the number of times on YouTube I get adverts saying, I can make a website by just clicking a few buttons and putting in a few prompts. It doesn't work that way. And you can watch some of my AI content or ask me questions about that to see why that doesn't work. But for prototyping, for communicating with engineers, for understanding where all the edge cases are, for showing things to customers, AI can really do a great job. We used a tool called Replit, R-E-P-L-I-T, and we used that tool in an event here in the Squirrel Squadron to build our own apps. And we had people like this person who's not writing code as part of her job, right? Her job is to move companies around and make sure that the budgets are right and so on, right? She's operating at a very high executive level, and she was writing apps. And she saw what the value was in creating those for her team. And the people I'm suggesting with our topic today can really make use of that are product managers who can turn into Joels, right? And I told you about Joel, who started as an engineer, moved over into product management, and applied a lot of his knowledge in a very effective way. Because he could write code and he could produce prototypes you could actually use. Guess what? You can do that now with AI used correctly. Now, the dangerous thing is you go off and you get an AI tool and you have it build you some piece of software and it's crooked and misshapen and doesn't work and it isn't the right thing. That's if you try to put it in production and use it, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. The tools aren't mature enough for that. But where they do work and where you do get very significant benefits very quickly, like the example of the CEO I was talking about, is exactly in product management. And so if you are sitting there as a product manager yourself and you're thinking, Squirrel's out for my job, Squirrel's telling me that I shouldn't build software, I should go and learn to be an engineer or something. No, don't do that. But do get good at prompt engineering. Do get good at using tools like Replit, because that's going to help you communicate really effectively with engineers. Just being a product manager, just having a certificate, just having something that allows you to understand customers and interpret specifications for engineers is not enough anymore. It wasn't enough back in Joel's day, in the early 2000s, because the very best customers, the very best companies, very best organizations I saw at that time had Joels. They had people who were multi-capable, who were T-shaped, who were able to do multiple things. Now, let me make another argument. I just want to make an analogy I've made many times before, but some of you may not have heard it. The reason that these folks with these T-shaped capacities can be so effective, the reason they're so helpful, is that they are potters rather than sculptors. So a sculptor comes along to a block of marble and goes tap, tap, tap. Oh, no, okay, gets a new piece of marble. Tap, tap, tap. Okay, that's good. Oh, let me think about this. Let me draw it. Let me figure it out. Oh, I'm not sure. Okay. And so making a mistake is very, very expensive. Takes a long time to recover from. You have to get a whole new piece of marble. And you have to think very carefully, because you don't want to incur that cost, about what you do. And so that's why so many organizations are so glacially slow at adopting new technology, at even just solving basic problems, because they're sculptors. They have to take a long time to do each thing. Why are they sculptors? Why does it cost so much to make changes in software? Typically because the loops involve lots of people. So it might be that you need a product manager to figure out that you should build something, a designer to design it, a front-end engineer to build the front end, a back-end engineer to build the back end. Don't worry if you don't know what those things mean. They're just pieces of software. A data engineer to create the data pipeline, a tester to test it. By the time you get all these people lined up and you take them off some other thing they're doing and they have to juggle it around, you take weeks and weeks and weeks to get something done. Some of you are stuck in environments where it takes you months and months or years and years to get something done. That's nightmarish. That's way, way, way behind the curve. My best clients release new software multiple times every day. And that means they can't go through all those steps. They've automated a bunch of them. They have people who can do multiple parts of those steps. They do them in batches. There's lots of tricks for that. Go look up elephant carpaccio and squirrel, and you'll see lots of my material on how to do that. But these T-shaped people, these folks who can do multiple jobs, and in particular product managers, those folks can do all those loops in their head. They can say, oh, let me just hack this up. Oh boy, I don't think this will work. Let me show it to the customer and get some feedback. Oh yeah, definitely this part doesn't work, but this part's better than I thought. Oh, okay, now let's go back and fix that. It happens within their heads. And a loop can happen much more quickly within your head than it can with lots of people. You don't have to coordinate. Maybe you have to coordinate your own work, but that's much simpler than finding a team that might be on the other side of the planet, depending on how big your organization is, and getting them to do something, right? There's companies I work with for whom they have to coordinate against across multiple time zones around the world to get only one feature done. And that's horrifically inefficient. And I always counsel them, try to get it inside one person's head if you can. So what those people are potters. So if you watch a potter making a pot, they have the wheel, right? And the wheel's going around and around, and they throw some clay on the pot, on the wheel, and they start shaping it. And they say, okay, well, this is a bit too fine an angle, right? It's too narrow here. I'm going to make it wider. And so they push the clay out, and they push the clay from the inside, and it whirls around, and they say, no, that's too wide now. Now I'm going to make it narrower. Well, I'd like a line here. No, that's too high. Let's take that away. And they take that away, and then they put some other line in, and they add some gel or whatever it is, there's some coloring and so on. They do all the bits that they do, and each step can be undone by one person who observes it and makes an immediate change. Completely different from the sculptor who has to carefully consider where he or she is going to tap, right? So because these folks can function as potters, they can get around the loop much faster. That means they're going back to customers much more frequently and getting better feedback from them. And that means that you can be much more responsive and stay ahead of your competition and build software that actually works and does what people need and solves whatever problem your software is supposed to solve in the first place, which often people forget when they get buried in lots of pieces of paper generated by product managers who don't really understand how the software is made, how the design is done, who aren't T-shaped. Okay, so there's my case for using these kinds of T-shaped people. Let me turn to a few of your questions. Now, I would love questions in the chat. I think it's a holiday week, so maybe we've got some people who are lying on the beach and maybe don't want to chat. That's okay. But a number of you have asked questions, maybe because you couldn't make it onto the recording, or because you're not in a position to ask questions. But I'm going to try to answer some of those questions now before I go on to some more material that I have. Let me just find those. Those are right over here. So Say loves to come to these. Maybe Say's out there. Say hi. That's hard to say if you're out there, but I love having Say in our discussions. And Say asks, will tech teams be able to absorb all the product responsibilities as they are, or will they need to grow to be able to deliver everything that a product manager would? If so, why not just keep the PMs? Now, this is a good question, but Say, I hope I've clarified in my sort of introductory remarks there. What I'm saying is keep your product managers, but give them a broader remit and greater skills. Help them with AI to be able to do prototypes. Help them learn design. Help them be multifaceted so they can do more jobs. So guess what? You're going to need a smaller team for that. And maybe you'll need some more AI or other tools that will help these folks. Tools are great, right? Tools are reliable. They work 24 hours a day. You don't have to pay sick leave. There's lots of things that are very good about pieces of software. If you could make your team more productive by adding some of those, by all means do that. And we're starting to get tools that help us use the right way. Now, I could go on a long tangent here about how not to use artificial intelligence. There are a lot of people who are going to lose a lot of money and a lot of time using it the wrong way. But assuming you're doing it the right way, there are really great tools appearing now. Replit is just one of the examples that can really multiply the effectiveness of your product managers, the ones you have today. That's why I said at the beginning, I'm not after you individually, I'm after your job. I'm after the title. Don't be just a product manager, or you're not going to have a job soon, because the folks who can use all these tools to be effective across the whole spectrum of needs for product teams that are building pieces of software, those are the ones who are going to be successful. So if you're a product manager, and I think Say might be one, I'm not actually sure what your role is, Say, get these additional skills if you haven't got them. If you've got them, trumpet them, start using them, exercise them, make sure they're on your CV or your resume. But these tools, these skills are going to be extremely important to make you into that T-shaped person, so you're not only a product manager. Say, I hope I've helped with your question. We've got something for Thomas. Hi, Thomas. Thomas says, what's your advice for prototyping with tools like Replit and knowing when they've hit their limits? When he hits blockers like error loops, he's not clear on whether it's a planning or skill issue on his part, or just where the current capabilities have limits. This makes lots of sense. Great question, Thomas. So the first thing is go find my live stream. I did a whole live stream using Replit, giving examples, working through it. So that should help you. And we hit some errors. So we hit some of those things and dealt with them. So go out, check that out. If you have trouble finding it, ask me, ask Laura, ask on the forum. We'll help you find it. I think you should be able to just search for AI and Squirrel, and it'll probably come up as a recent live stream. But let me deal with it now, give you a little bit of a guide. The thing that actually is most effective for the use of these tools is to have an engineer kind of on call. Now, if you're somebody like the person I was saying before, the one who's the CEO of CEOs, she's not probably going to want to just do this by herself and hit these errors and be stuck with them. She wants to get her idea out. She wants to sculpt, not sculpt, but pot. Is that how you call it? I don't know. What does a potter do? Make a pot and not be a sculptor. She wants to be there sort of working with it, giving her ideas, making sure she's channeling the customer appropriately, guiding the engineers. That's what she wants to do. And so for someone like that, I said, have an engineer just sit next to you. That's a good investment, right? Because you're taking a very senior person's time to recognize a new clever idea, and having a full-time engineer just sit there and help you deal with these kinds of problems is worth it. Thomas, I don't know what level you're at. You might be at that level, in which case that would be sensible for you. If you're not at that level, then it might make sense for you to have an engineer who's ready to help you with those kinds of things. And the engineer might say, well, look, actually, Thomas, you've kind of hit a limit here. This tool isn't really going to do it. Let us deal with that. That's only going to come up when we have 1,000 users. You don't have 1,000 users. Just show us how it should work for one user, and we'll figure out the other bit. And that would be very helpful. Or the engineer might say, oh, yeah, let me just fix that. Give a little command or refine your prompt to Replit, and then you're back on track and working well. The last thing is sometimes it doesn't matter. So it has a funny error, and you just tell the engineers, hey, wait a minute, I hit a funny error here, but clearly we don't want that. What we want is this output. The thing is that even though these tools are imperfect, and they're going to get better, and they'll deal with these things, and you know, we're going to get better and better at this as a society. But what you can use them for is for much faster prototyping, much faster potting, and creating the software that you want and communicating it really clearly to engineers. So Thomas, kudos to you. Very proud that you're trying this and you're running into this problem. It's the right problem to hit, but don't worry about it too much. Either get an engineer to help you or show it to them without it. But keep using the tools, keep building software yourself, so that you can illustrate to most especially customers, but also to engineers what you're after. Thomas, if you have more on that, please feel free to ask them. I'm glad you asked that. Now, where was another question that came in before? I know Bereslav's here. Bereslav's, I think, on the tech end of this, so he's on the engineering side. Tech teams need people who understand the viewpoints and needs of different stakeholder groups, users, sales, developers, etc. If we don't have a dedicated role for this, who should be in that position instead? Now, I promise you I did not pay Bereslav to ask this question, but I was really hoping someone would, and I'm really glad, Bereslav, that you did, because it gives me the chance to tell another story. So you might remember that I mentioned that in the early 2000s, we're working in the city, we're having traders throw phones at us and so on. We didn't have any product managers when we got started. The people who did product management, the people who figured out what people wanted were, guess what? Us engineers. And we would troop on over to see someone who wanted us to build some new thing for their hedge fund or whatever it was. And we'd sketch things on napkins and draw things on whiteboards, and we'd figure out what we needed to do. Now, Bereslav is right. we weren't as good at that as we could have been. None of us were traders. None of us understood finance to any great depth, at least not in those days. We hired some people who did, who did have greater knowledge about that later in the evolution of the company. But at that time, when our product was relatively new, none of us understood anything. So we would get stuff wrong. We were slow. We would create the wrong pot. We'd create the wrong screens, and we'd get dinged for it and had to duck for the phones that we got thrown at us. But we got better and better at that. And it was something that we developed empathy for, and we really came to understand our customers. And I had a great example with an engineer named Ryan. And Ryan was constantly complaining that the customers were too demanding. We couldn't really give them what they needed. Browsers at that time, we were building one of the early software as a service products, although we didn't quite know it by that name. Browsers weren't very sophisticated. They didn't have some of the clever things they have today. And of course, that didn't stop our customers saying, make it do this. And Ryan would say, why do you want it to do that? I mean, can't you just click this button? And so we packed Ryan off one day to go and spend some time with a salesperson who was going to go onto a trading floor. Now, some of you may have been on trading floors. Others of you may have seen pictures of them in movies like The Big Short or Wolf of Wall Street. There's a whole bunch of these, Margin Call. So if you've either seen a real one or you've seen one in the movies, you'll have an impression of what it's like. Every single desk is completely covered by monitors. By the way, I think these are going to be Vision Pros in the future. People are going to have things on their faces so they can look in all directions and get data on all sides of them. That's just my crazy notion. But at that time, and still today, you have monitors all over your desk. You have a special monitor, special tool called a Bloomberg, and that's a special machine that's sitting there ready to trade with you and get you in contact with lots of people around the world. They're all owned by Michael Bloomberg, I think. You also had all kinds of other things going on. So there's a TV on the side. There's a thing called a squawk box where somebody in another part of the building can say, hey, everybody trade on this right now. And there's people shouting and throwing their lunches at each other. I mean, this is quite a wild environment. High input, right? And so if you are, attention deficit disorder or something like that, you have those kinds of problems. You might either be in heaven, you might say, this is really great, or you're going to say, oh my God, this is the worst place ever. It is definitely a environment you have to get used to. So we sent him into one of these, and he walks in, and his eyes just get huge. Oh my God, what's going on here? And he talked to some of the traders, and he walked around with a salesperson who was selling to them, and so on. So he got a real good immersion in the environment. And he came back, and I said, "What did you think?" He said, "Well, this is really wild. Now I understand why these guys do so much cocaine." And when he said that, I said, "Now you really do understand, right? These folks live in an environment that is high distraction, high input, very loud, very noisy, very distracting. And so your software needs to do a much better job of existing in that environment. You have huge amounts of competition." And so he became one of our better engineers after this experience at understanding what customers needed. Now, Berislav, in your case, there might be very different sorts of things you need to do. I don't remember what your software stack is, or who you're serving and so on. But in your case, you might need to do other actions in order to get engineers ready to be these T-shaped people, to be a Joel, right, who's coming from the engineering side to be an effective product manager. But my challenge to you is, I bet you can figure out how to do that. If you're not sure, ask. That's what the Squirrel Squadron is here for. And I'd love to talk with you more about that on the forum or elsewhere, to see if we can figure out how to get those engineers thinking in the about the stakeholders, just as you say, users, sales, developers. We used to do it before product managers came along, and we still could, by making sure people have multiple skills and can work in multiple directions. So I have a lot more to say about that, but let me stop there. And Berislav, you ask if that hasn't answered your question. I'm going to keep going. Natasha says, now this is an interesting direction. How can product managers bring more human-centered product innovation? Well, Natasha, I hope that product managers are spending an awful lot of time with humans. That's what product managers should be uniquely skilled at. And when, say, an engineer or designer or somebody else who might be moving into product management might be adding it to their or portfolio rather than having just one skill. That's what I'm advocating. I would hope that those folks are adding that to a human-centered approach that they already have. So that's where I think product managers really shine when they are wearing their product manager hat. They understand what users might be thinking about, what's important to them, why they're paying for the software, why they're not paying for the software, what's valuable or important to them. So I hope that that's what we're getting from folks who claim to have a product manager skill. Guess what? An awful lot of people who are product managers have kind of died behind their eyes. They're kind of zombies. And they really, at the very worst case, they take a bunch of things that the customer has given them, and they pick them up and they carry them to somewhere else, and they say, good, now you go and build this thing. Thank you for the blueprints. I'm now going to hand the blueprints to someone who will build what's on the blueprints. This is kind of depressing, right? It makes me very sad when I hear about folks who are working in this way, because it's not very creative. It's not very interesting to simply interpret what the customer says, not even really add very much to it, and hand it over to engineers. I want you to stop doing that. And that's why, I gave this crazy title and said, you guys should fire your product managers. I mean, fire the role. And the role far, far, far too often, especially in things like Scrum, where there's very rigid rules and very rigid processes and so on, it is really a bureaucratic role. It's one in which people are just taking a bunch of things that someone gives them, and without really applying much knowledge, much human-centeredness, without applying much creativity, turning it into something that engineers can work with. There's a place for McDonald's. I'm very glad we have McDonald's. I hope people who like going to McDonald's go there. But we don't go there for great cuisine. We don't go there for Michelin stars, right? We go there for kind of same old, very predictable, not very nutritious food. That's what you get out from a bureaucratic process, from a ritualized process, from a repetitive process. Because guess what happens at McDonald's? You get some meat in, and you stick it on the grill for a certain prescribed period of time, and then you put it in a bun, and then you put a certain amount of ketchup on it, and you give it to the customer. I don't know how you make burgers, but something like that. It's ritualized, it's defined, it's well-known. It's not very hard. Doesn't require a lot of creativity. If you're creative in making your burger, you're going to get fired from McDonald's. And you want creative people. You want people who are working in the complex domain. I may get to talk about that. One of my favorite topics. You want people who are able to work on something that no one's ever done before, come up with a better solution. And guess what? Being T-shaped is a prerequisite. It's table stakes. It's where you have to start. So Natasha, I hope I'm helping. What I mean is that if you're just a plain product manager and you're making the burgers, you're not going to be human-centered. That's my view. Okay, I'm going to take one more of these and then cover at least, I can get into complex and simple and complicated. Because I think that's a very helpful framework for this. So I'll get into that in a minute, but let me take one more question. Let's see. Of course, devs could know the customer. This is Boris. Of course, devs could know the customers too, but then this work could impact their involvement in writing code. What is the line where a PM makes sense? So Boris, this is a wonderful question. Again, I did not pay Boris to ask this, but this is often what someone will say is they'll say, hang on a second. The engineers are always telling us they need to get into flow. They need to be concentrating. It's knowledge work, so they need to be able to really focus on what they're doing and be really, really productive by just really concentrating on talking to the computer. Now, they're right. But if you ask the engineers to also get additional input at separate times, right? So they shouldn't have customers coming up and tapping them on the shoulder while they're trying to write some complicated, multi-threaded fancy server or something. But if they can control when they are going and getting customer input, they will not build the wrong thing. So I get so many questions so often from folks, well-meaning, I understand the question, but they say things like, well, couldn't I teach the engineers to type faster? Couldn't I help the engineers to be more efficient? Couldn't I get them more focused? Shouldn't I just lock them in a room? Wouldn't it be better if we outsourced and they were in another country and we just handed them the work to do? Because they would stop being distracted by all this other stuff. The other stuff is the work. The other stuff is the input that engineers need in order to build the correct thing. And if you cut them off from that by introducing a separate role of product manager, I'm claiming that that is counterproductive, because you lengthen the communication lines, you introduce more mistakes. In England, we call this Chinese whispers. In America, you call it the telephone game, whatever you call it. I tell you, you tell the next person, they tell the next person. By the time it gets to the end of the chain, nobody knows what the initial statement was, right? It's changed all the way along. And you get more and more and more of that as you introduce more and more and more steps. So stop doing that. Now, maybe, Boris, what you meant, I don't think so, but I'm going to answer this part anyway. How do you divide the time, right? So if you have some engineer who's supposed to also be talking to customers, how much should they do of each one? Well, I think they can be in charge of that, but you want to get the output. The output is very fast learning. Now, it might be they need to spend a whole day sitting on that trading floor, having phones thrown at them, really understanding what those traders need, for example. And then that's going to help a person like Ryan go back, sit at his desk for half a day or a week, and produce something that he can then take back to the trading floor. That's fine. But what you want to see is very rapid iterations. If the engineers are just disappearing off for months and months and months and producing stuff that's the wrong thing, that means you have not guided them well. How have you not guided them well? You haven't given them access to the people who can tell them what they should be building. All right. So, Boris, I hope that's helpful. We've had more from Thomas. Oh, Thomas has the same question as Boris. Excellent. Maybe I anticipated it. Should most engineers, but I love Thomas's approach on it, so I'm going to read that up. Should most engineers talk to customers versus async notes or recordings? I have a funny story about recordings. Recordings can be very helpful. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not what I'm talking about today. Engineers protect their heads down time. What's the right balance? How do you give them direct customer contact? Put them in charge. So they can say, look, I'm going to spend the morning really understanding what the software can do. And in the afternoon, I'll go get some feedback from customers on what I've managed to put together. But you need that loop to be short. You need it mostly be happening inside the engineer's head with the appropriate input that they're in charge of. So Thomas, I hope that's helpful. But I wouldn't cut off engineers from asynchronous information as well. It could be that there's writing that customers are doing, or prototypes they sketch out, or a user researcher who goes off and does the work. I'd rather have the engineer doing it, rather have the product manager with multiple responsibilities doing it. But there's nothing wrong with having someone produce some information that engineers can consume asynchronously, not necessarily interactively. I had a wonderful example of this. A client had, let's see, how did it work? I remember. They were building a sort of version of Excel. They were building a spreadsheet tool. And the difficulty they had was they were trying to build something that worked like Excel. Most of the people who used their software were working with Excel all the time, and so they were building a replacement for it. And so we had this video of a user in a user session giving feedback on how the software worked, and they had, of course, a grid of cells, just like you see in Excel. And so they're working with a grid of cells, and they're putting things in, and they're putting in formulas and so on, and this thing's working pretty much like Excel. And they're having a great time. The engineers are watching and taking notes and saying, okay, this seems to work. And then nothing happens on the screen for a while. I said, what's going on here? And what they noticed is that the arrow, the pointer, had moved down. Let's see, on my screen, it's moving down into the lower right. I don't, for them, it was in the lower left. Maybe I should go over there. So, they're clicking on the lower left to get something to happen. And they're clicking and clicking there. And it was hard to see this at first. It's a little pointer and, it's not moving. So eventually, the person who was conducting the interview on the recording said, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to shift between tabs. And all the engineers in unison shouted at the screen. Remember, the person's not there. This is a recording. There's no one actually present. And all the engineers are shouting, it's on the right. It's on the right. And then eventually, the interviewer said, it's on the right. And the user went and clicked it. Obviously, we put the button in the wrong place. They weren't expecting it there. And that was very useful input for the engineers. Now, would it have been even better if one or some of them could have talked to that user? Absolutely. Because they could say, why do you think it's on the right? Well, it's there in Excel. Would it be better if it was on the left? Could you learn it? No, I've been doing this for 30 years. What do you mean? Put it on the right, correct side where I'm used to it. That would have been a useful discussion to have. But they got a lot out of the asynchronous interaction as well. So there may be situations where that's the best you can do, or it's hard to get to your users, or they're on the other side of the planet or something like that. Do it asynchronously if you need to. But get those engineers talking as much as possible to real users, and get the users to be engineers, right? With the AI tools, with the design tools, and the other things that we have these days, a lot of those folks can make the transition the other way. And that can be tremendously valuable. Thomas, I hope that was a helpful picture for you. So I just want to come to one other idea, which I love to talk about. So if you haven't heard me talk Welsh, then you're in for, I hope, a treat. And those of you who know me will know what I'm going to talk about. There's a framework by a guy called Dave Snowden. And here's my advice to you. If you want to invent something really useful and get people to use it, do not name it in Welsh. Dave did not listen to this advice, which I did not have the chance to give him. And he named it the Cynefin framework, which is spelt in a very strange way, Cynefin. If you have trouble finding that, ask me, because I know it makes it hard to Google. But the basic idea is that there are several different quadrants that you can be in when you're trying to do something. It's kind of a way of thinking about the world and dividing the world into domains. One of the domains is the simple domain, or the obvious domain. He has different names for it. And that's the domain that is like, say, building a box out of wood. Probably most of us could figure out how to go to our local do-it-yourself store, get some lumber, make a nice rectangular box, and we put toys in it or put garden furniture in it and so on. I've done that, and I kind of understand how to do that. It's a very simple thing to do. If you really needed to, you could go look up YouTube videos on it. You could understand it very quickly, and you probably wouldn't make too many mistakes. There's another domain, which is more like building a house, right? I would be terrible at building a house. My house would fall down. I don't know how to do it. But there are very smart people who have been building houses collectively for thousands of years, have had a lot of them fall down, and really understand how to build houses. And if you're not sure how to build your house, you can find one of them, or read a book, or find a course to take, and you can get an expert to help you with the process of building that house. So house building is in the complicated domain. And of course, Snowden is here using normal English to have special meanings. So sorry if that's confusing, but it's a very useful way of splitting up the world. Now, the complex domain is building a starship, like Mr. Musk is doing. He just blew up yet another spaceship the other day. And SpaceX is building something no one has ever built before. You can't go read a book that says, here's how to build a reusable spaceship whose boosters can come down and be caught by gantries, and which is eventually going to take Mr. Musk to Mars. In my opinion, Mr. Musk should just stay on Mars once he gets there, but that's another story. So but the SpaceX folks are building something in the complex domain because no one's ever done it before. There's no experts you can consult, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So you better make them quickly, which is exactly what the SpaceX is doing, blowing up spaceships over and over again until they get it right. And that's exactly what you should be doing with your software. Now, the reason I go into this and give you these illustrations is another domain called chaos, and other things. You can go really deep in this if you want to, but I'm just going to stick to the three domains. The reason I bring this up is that the kind of people who operate well in the complex domain have many, many skills, and you get many diverse points of view involved because no one has done it before. You can't consult an expert. In the simple and complicated domains, it makes a lot more sense to narrow the field and say, all right, we're going to build it the standard way. Right. I know you might build your strange house that's going to be upside down. The chimney will be on the bottom, and, other kind of crazy stuff. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to stick to a nice, well-known house. We have blueprints. We know how houses work. We can build houses. We'll do that. It's in the complicated domain. However, when you're building something new, like a spaceship that no one has ever built before, you want to try things creatively. You want new perspectives. You want to try crazy stuff that might not work, and blow up a few spaceships, because that's how you're going to learn quickly. The people who can do that are your T-shaped people. And what I'm advocating is that you not narrowly look for limited skills, people who know just one thing and know it really well and are really effective at doing something that's well known and well understood. They're the experts, perhaps, in the complicated domain. You don't want those people, not in software, because almost every piece of software that somebody is paying a team to build is something no one's ever done before. It's going to be different in some unique way. I built with a team, of course, software that handled a warehouse and making sure that the right goods were in the warehouse. We kind of know how to do that. The Egyptians were doing that. Squirrel, why on earth are we doing that? Why is it new? We had 4,000 new SKUs, new products every week. That was new. Not everybody had that many new products. You sell some lawnmowers, well, you have 12 different models of lawnmowers. We had thousands to deal with. And so there's always this kind of variation. There's always this kind of new creative challenge that you're getting in software. It's one reason it's exciting to work in software, but it's another reason that people lose an awful lot of money building the wrong software, relying on product managers who are turning the crank, who are doing the same thing, who are not exercising creativity, who aren't T-shaped, who aren't operating in multiple domains and with multiple capacities. They're taking a set of specifications and turning around and handing them to developers. If that's all you're doing, if you're a product manager doing that, your days are numbered, because AI can do that. And it will do it even more, and we'll need less and less of it. We need these T-shaped people. If you're hiring people like this, if you look around and you meet some of your product managers and they're narrow, they have blinders on, they're only looking in one direction. Those are folks you might want to either retrain or fire. That's what I'm telling you to do. Because if you just have product manager on your business card, you're not in the right place. You're not doing the right thing. You're going to be in trouble, and your organization is going to be in trouble. They're paying you to do less than you need to. Okay, so that's my peroration. That's my argument for why you should dump people who are just product managers. But if you can retrain those folks, if you can give them additional skills, if you can make them T-shaped, they're going to be more valuable to themselves and to your organization. So that's what I'm advocating you do as well. Well, I enjoyed talking with you about this. I got provocative questions from Thomas and Barislav and Say and other folks, which I really appreciate. Lots more to do on the squadron. We have events coming up all through June. We have continuous discussions all the time on the forum. And I love provoking you, giving you new ideas, and discussing all these topics with all of you. So I'll see you next week for sure at our next event. And if you're going to be hanging around on the forum and asking questions, I'd love to talk to you there as well. Everybody have a fantastic day. Stay warm, and I will see you again very soon.